All right, well, welcome to our first webinar to connect with members of our community who are seeking advice navigating personal finances during this pandemic. And our intent is to give you a few things to think about and perhaps spur some conversation about the road ahead, and if possible, maybe if necessary, to put you in contact with someone that can personally walk you through some of your specific challenges. My name is George Beach. I'm a pastor here at Autumn Ridge Church, and our first session is going to be hosted by Terry and Marianne Jenny, and Terry's a retired attorney. Marianne is serving as an executive coach at the Mayo Clinic. We're blessed to have them hosting this session and eager to hear what they have to say about understanding Minnesota unemployment today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry and Marianne. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor George. It really is a pleasure and an honor to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I have been furloughed for 2 weeks.
Yes, week 2.
And several weeks to go. And so this is my first journey into the world of unemployment, and as it is for many of my colleagues. And so as we were navigating these waters very clumsily, Terry was a huge help, not only to me, but to several of my friends and colleagues. And so we're looking forward to sharing some information with you in the hopes that this will be a blessing to you. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Terry.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to say that for Marianne and I, our hearts go out to everyone who finds themselves struggling during these uncertain times. For many of you, my wife included, as she just said, you find yourself trying to navigate the waters of unemployment, perhaps for the very first time in your life. Don't be discouraged. You can do this. Our goal today here is to provide you with some general information about how unemployment works and the effect the CARES Act can have or impact your unemployment compensation. So the first thing you have to ask yourself generally is, am I eligible for unemployment benefits? And under Minnesota, we have basically 5 requirements. The first requirement is you have to have sufficient earnings in your base period. There is a really complicated formula for figuring that out. And so suffice it to say that if you earn more than $3,000 in 2019, you may very well be eligible for unemployment compensation.
For this point, right?
The second point is that you be legally authorized to work in the U.S. The third requirement is you be unemployed or working reduced hours through no fault of your own. The fourth requirement is you have to actively be seeking employment each and every week. Now, for those people who have been furloughed or temporarily laid off and you're planning to return to your original employer, there's a executive order out there that says as long as you stay in touch with your employer during this pandemic emergency, that requirement is satisfied. And the final requirement is that you be able and willing to return to suitable work without delay when it is offered to you. So you filled out your application, you've determined, wow, overall I'm eligible for unemployment. What do I do now? How much do I get and how long do I get it? So the first thing you do is you go to the Minnesota website. The state is going to determine your weekly benefit amount. So you click on the benefits estimator on the unemployment website and you plug in your social security number. It's okay, it's a safe site. They have all your information, and in a box, a number is going to pop up. And that number is your weekly benefit payment. What does that mean? It means if you don't work any amount during the following weeks, you're going to get that weekly benefit amount from the state each and every week. In addition, and this is probably the first place I'm going to introduce the CARES Act. So for all of those people who are navigating unemployment for the first time, if you go on the Minnesota website and you follow their guidelines and it comes up that you're eligible for a weekly benefit payment, whatever that payment is, in addition to that, the Federal CARES Act is going to do an add-on of $600 per week, at least through July 31st, 2020. And that $600 a week, that's exactly what it is. It is an add-on. You have to qualify under the state guidelines for a weekly benefit payment. If you do, or you will qualify for any portion of a weekly benefit payment, the $600 gets added on. If you don't qualify for a weekly benefit payment, you lose the $600 and you don't receive it. The other thing that the CARES Act did with regard to employees who find themselves unemployed, what's the duration? How long can I get unemployment? Generally under state law, that is 26 weeks. But the CARES Act has extended that for an additional 13 weeks. So in 2020, if you find yourself unemployed, you can receive unemployment compensation for a total of 39 weeks or till the end of the year. Now that $600 payment is only right now guaranteed through July 31st. So that doesn't continue. There's legislation in Congress that might extend that, but as of now, it's only guaranteed through July 31st.
Terry, there's a question.
Yes.
Who determines what is suitable? You use that word suitable employment.
The state determines that, and those requirements have also been relaxed a little bit by executive order. If you're a rocket scientist, you probably don't have to go get a job at Walmart or something like that. But if there's something that fits your qualifications and might suit you as suitable employment, at least in the interim, you're probably required to take that particular job.
And what if you don't feel safe going back to work because of COVID-19, but you're offered work?
Okay, there's an executive order on that as well. And basically what Governor Walz has said is if you are at risk of COVID-19 or you can't go back because of health reasons, if you have a doctor that says it's not good for you to be at work, or maybe there's a health scare in your work, you don't have to go back to work at that point in time.
Okay.
So, first of all, now you've made the determination that you're qualified. You've figured out your benefit payment under Minnesota. $740 is the maximum amount that you can receive on a weekly basis, and $25 is the minimum payment you can receive on a weekly basis. So when you're applying, you're going to be somewhere in that range. Okay. So now you've applied, you're eligible. They've set up and told you what your weekly benefit amount is. What do I do now? Okay. So each week, after your application is accepted, you have to go in and you have to specifically request a benefit payment. You do that each week because unemployment pays on a weekly basis. You're going to get paid week to week to week, but you have to go in and you have to request that benefit payment. So in any given week, if you don't work, you're going to get your minimum amount that was determined from Minnesota, and you're going to get the $600 add-on. It's going to be two separate deposits, but you're going to get the full amount. Okay. So what if I work, or what if I take some vacation time, or what if I take some PTO time, something like that. So any given week you're going in, you're making that request for a benefit payment. And in determining whether you qualify that week for a benefit payment, Minnesota has a two-part test. The first test is an hours test. If you work more than 32 hours in any given week, you are considered to be fully employed. You do not collect any unemployment or weekly benefit from the state, and as a result, you lose your $600 payment under the CARES Act. If you're working less than 32 hours, they also have an earnings test. So in any week when you're not working 32 hours, but you're working some, they have what's called the earnings test. It's gross earnings. And if your gross earnings in any given week equal or exceed your weekly benefit amount, you don't qualify for a benefit payment that week, and you will not get the $600 payment under the CARES Act. how does vacation and personal time off fit into that? If you take PTO, as I'm going to call it, each week when you go in to request a benefit payment, you have to answer some questions. And one of the questions is, did you have any other earnings? You have to report earnings from vacation, PTO, holiday pay, things like that in that particular screen. And again, that's going to be determinative if you satisfy the earnings test and if your earnings are low enough to qualify you for a weekly benefit payment.
Another question has come in. If somebody works for a nonprofit that doesn't pay unemployment insurance, can you still get benefits from the state?
That's an interesting question, because what you will find, and what some people have found, is you have people with disabilities, some young people, some other people with disabilities are working at ABC or Possibilities or something like that. And what ends up happening is they're not required to purchase unemployment insurance, and they are not required to report income for each person to that department, the Department of Employment and Economic Development. So if you have somebody, a disabled young person or whatnot, or you know somebody, and they have went in and tried to apply because ABC is basically shut down because of the coronavirus, you're going to get a letter from the state saying you don't qualify because you didn't have any earnings in your base period. Now that can be changed, because even though they aren't required to report it to them, you might still have a young person who earned enough money in 2019 to still qualify. So when you get the letter from the unemployment office saying you didn't earn enough money, you take the W-2 from 2019 for that young person or that person with disabilities, and you send it back to the state. And again, they're going to reconsider it, and you may very well qualify for an unemployment benefit. And even if you get that $25, the $600 is added on. Okay.
So a little extra step, but it's certainly possible.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So if you aren't sure, or you don't know if your person qualifies for unemployment, apply anyway. And they'll tell you if you get disqualified, why you're not qualified, and you may be able to present further information that will help them out.
Okay, great.
How does working affect my unemployment compensation? Well, let's just say for purposes of this webinar that your husband is driving you crazy and you want to get out of the house and maybe go find a part-time job. I think that probably hits home with my wife, Mary.
It's a little too close to the truth.
Again, you're not eligible for any unemployment compensation if you work 32 hours or more. You aren't eligible for a weekly benefit if your earnings test isn't passed. But say you're under, you stay under the earnings test, you pass that, your gross earnings do not equal or exceed your weekly benefit payments, you're still going to get an unemployment benefit. But the way the state handles that is this: they're going to reduce your weekly benefit payment by 50 cents on the dollar. So whatever, if you earn $1 in gross earnings, they're going to reduce your weekly benefit by 50 cents. So if you go out and you earn $200 in a week, your weekly benefit is going to be reduced by $100. So a lot of people ask this question: if I want to get a part-time job and I know what they've offered to pay me, but I don't really want to jeopardize all my unemployment because of that $600 payment through the CARES Act, how many hours can I work with and safely stay qualified for unemployment benefits? Here's a rule of thumb, okay? When you've figured out your weekly unemployment benefit and you know the hourly rate that you're going to get, simply divide that unemployment benefit by the hourly rate, and you're going to come up with an approximate number that has a decimal point. Round down, and that should tell you the number of hours you can work, okay, and still collect some portion of your unemployment. That's a lot of information, and so Mary Ann and I are going to try a sort of a real world example. So let's say you find yourself temporarily furloughed or laid off, and you figured out your unemployment benefit for that for the weeks to come is $480 a week under state guidelines, okay? You've gone to Hy-Vee, they want you to unload trucks during the evening, and they've offered to pay you $22 an hour for your work. So you go home and you say, how many hours can I work? We're going to put our rule of thumb into play here. You take your weekly benefit of $480, you divide by $22, your hourly rate, you come up with 21.8 hours. We're going to round down to 21 hours, and you should still be safe to collect some portion of your weekly benefit, and as a result, you get the $600 add-on. So I'm going to test the math here. 21 hours times $22 an hour comes out to be $462 gross earnings. Our weekly benefit amount is $480, so we still are good under the earnings test. We're not going to get kicked off of everything, but our weekly benefit amount is going to be reduced 50 cents for every dollar of gross earnings. That's $231 taken off, and what you're left with is $262 for an unemployment benefit for that week. And because you qualified for a portion of your unemployment benefit for that week, you get the $600 add-on. So for that total week, your total compensation from all sources would be $1,311 before any deductions are taken out. The CARES Act. We're going to talk just a little bit more about that. We've touched on the fact that employees who find themselves laid off or unemployed can collect that extra $600 payment a week through July 31st, 2020. We've talked about the fact that it gives you 13 additional weeks of benefits through December 31st, 2020. But again, those benefits are only state benefits. So it only gives you 13 additional weeks of your state benefits. It does not have any effect on that $1,600 a week payment. As of now, that ends July 31st. The third thing, and the thing I want to just touch on a little bit, under state law, most self-employed people and independent contractors are not eligible for unemployment benefits, okay? But what the CARES Act did is it expanded the list of people who might be eligible for unemployment compensation under the CARES Act. And people that are included in that are self-employed workers, independent contractors. There's some other ones that may have not qualified under the regular unemployment process. But what you do, you file an application with the state of Minnesota, because Minnesota is going to administer any payments under the CARES Act. So you file that application with the state of Minnesota. First, they're going to review your application to determine if you qualify for unemployment benefits under their regular rules. And if you don't, because of self-employment income, and that's where most of your income came from, they're going to go back, they're going to reevaluate your application, and they're going to reevaluate it under the CARES Act. And if you're an independent contractor or you're self-employed and you aren't working for reasons related to COVID-19, you may very well qualify for unemployment benefits at this point in time. I will say this, the unemployment website is sort of getting geared up for this. So not everything is up to snuff, I would say, as of yet. But the one thing that is good, if you are self-employed, you can go back and you can backdate your application to the first week you were unemployed or the day the act was passed, whichever is later.
That's only for self-employed.
That's only for self-employed people and independent contractors. And the reason they're allowing that is because they've had trouble getting that website up and running properly. Mm-hmm. So if you are self-employed and you don't know whether you qualify or not, my suggestion would be apply anyway. The most they can tell you is no, but you may find that while you aren't regularly qualified under the CARES Act, you are. Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to touch on this particular subject is generally, or under the old system, there was a 1-week waiting period before you could receive benefits from Minnesota. That 1-week period has been waived. You file your application, The next week, when you request a benefit payment, you're automatically eligible that week to start. You don't have a 1 week period in there where you have to wait.
Terry, there's a question.
Yes.
What happens after July 31st with that $600 a week?
Let's talk about that because unknown. There's already talk about stimulus 4 or stimulus 5. I can't really keep track of it. And there are a number of proposals that are floating around. The one that just came out the other day would extend that $600 payment till the end of December, okay? But it hasn't passed. There's another proposal that says, well, we're going to extend that payment to September 30th, but we're going to drop it down to $400 a week, not $600 a week. So right now, I would say it's unknown. What we do know is the federal government has guaranteed that $600 payment through the end of July. And as of now, that's all the further it goes. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
So here's some tips. I think Mary and I kind of came up with some tips that we discovered when she went through this process. Apply the week you're laid off or your hours are reduced. Make your application for that week. Because if you're a regular employee, there's no backdating, okay? You cannot apply and request a benefit payment in the same week. So apply the week you're laid off, your hours are reduced, your first benefit payment is the next week, but it's always looking at the previous work for the previous week for the benefit payment. So it's always looking back a week, okay? So apply the week you're laid off and request the benefit payments the week after. Once you filled out your application under Minnesota, there is no extra paperwork needed to get the $600 add-on under the CARES Act. There's no other paperwork that's needed.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Because another question came in about the stimulus checks.
Yes.
And that there is potentially a bill about additional stimulus checks. What do you know about that?
Again, nothing is determined. There are proposals, I think the three that I've heard about, there's one that's just been proposed that a person who files an income tax return, and again, this isn't under unemployment, this is just basically through the through the IRS, that people get $1,200 a month for each person, $2,400 for a married couple, for a period of 3 months. Total you can get in that 3-month period is $6,000. There is another proposal that's trying to get $2,000 to a married couple till the end of the year. But again, none of that has passed. So as it stands right now, the last stimulus check that you received, the $1,200 per person, $2,400 per married couple, is the only one that's been passed and the only one you're going to get for now.
So more to come, maybe.
There's more to come, and if there are
More information to come.
yeah, there might be more payments to come, and if there are, we will try and keep people updated by notifying them of things that we know have passed and new information on both the stimulus payments and the additional payments under the CARES Act. So we'll try and keep people updated on it.
Okay. All right.
If you work in any given week, still apply for your benefit payment every week, even if you know you aren't eligible for a benefit payment that particular week. It keeps your account active. And here's a good example. So some people at the Mayo Clinic are doing what are called flexible furloughs. Maybe you work a week, you're off 2 weeks, you work a week, you're off 2 weeks. You continue to apply every week for unemployment benefits. For the weeks you aren't eligible, you're just going to get a note that says you aren't eligible for a weekly benefit payment. If you're working your normal schedule, you're probably not eligible for a weekly benefit payment. But if the next week, when you're not working at all, your weekly benefit kicks back in. So keep applying every week. When you go onto the Minnesota website and you request that benefit payment, and you get to the end, and up pops a number for your weekly benefit, you're going, wow, what happened to my $600 payment under the CARES Act? It won't show up there, okay? It will be added on your deposit when they deposit the regular amount, the weekly benefit from the state of Minnesota. That $600 add-on will be put in as a separate deposit, and it's probably going to follow them boom, boom, because Minnesota's administering it. But their paperwork, they got to get money back from the federal government. So it comes in as 2 payments. Don't worry that it doesn't show up when you apply. It's going to be deposited in your account. Unemployment benefits are subject to income tax, okay? When you apply, the application will allow you to withhold money for state or federal income tax. You can go 0. You can hold just federal. You can withhold state income tax payments as well. And at the end of the year, they're going to send out a 1099-G. These are the gross earnings you had from unemployment. This is the amount that was withheld for federal income tax, and this is the amount that was withheld for state income tax. A curious thing is they will not withhold it from the $600 payment. You're getting that, can't withhold. If you get the $600 payment, it's still subject to income tax. The guidelines have come out. That's still subject to income tax, but they aren't going to withhold any amounts from that $600 add-on payment. So keep that in the back of your mind, because maybe next year on April 15th, your tax bill is going to be a little bit higher. Remember, you're always requesting benefits for the previous week. That's important, I think, as we start to come out of these furloughs and people start returning to work. Say you have 1 week where you don't work at all, but you've gotten your letter saying, report back next Monday. So you report back to work next Monday, but you don't request a benefit payment for the previous week until Wednesday. So Wednesday, you're applying for your previous benefit payment. It's going to be measured on the previous week, okay? There's a question that's going to come up, say, have you returned to work full time? And you think to yourself, well, I returned on Monday, so you're going to click yes. If you do that, the system will flag it, and they won't allow you to get a benefit payment that week. And they're trying to get that glitch out, but that's been a glitch so far. And even though you didn't work the previous week, you reported that you returned to work full time, and you might not get paid for that week without going through a lengthy process. So just click no. Wait till you worked a full week, and the next week when you're doing your request for benefit payment, then click in that you have returned to work full time, and then it will ask you the date. So do that, and you should be fine. If your employer reopens or you are recalled to work, you get your letter saying come back to work, generally you have to do so. Under the Minnesota rules, you have to do so. Refusing to do so may affect your continued eligibility. If you had a job and you're laid off or furloughed, and now the employer comes back and says, we want you to return to work, even if it's at a reduced hour rate, you can't say to yourself, well, I'm making more on unemployment than I would be working, so I'm going to decline. That is viewed under Minnesota rules as you weren't willing to accept suitable work and you no longer are eligible for unemployment. So if your employer calls you, maybe you can negotiate. If you can negotiate hours down and still qualify for some benefit payments, but you can't just refuse not to go back to work. And the last tip that I would have, if you're not sure if you're eligible or not, apply anyway. The worst they're going to do is say no. They may give you some reasons, and you might have some documentation that will make them change their mind. So I know I've thrown a lot of information at you in a short period of time, and in a minute I think Pastor George is going to come in and tell us maybe we haven't answered your specific question. So here's a way to submit a question, and we're going to figure out ways to either get back to you, or we're going to figure out ways to get you in touch with the right people. He's going to have more information on how you go about that. I just want to say from Marianne and my perspective, these times are difficult. So our suggestion would be cling to your faith, put your trust in the Lord. He's going to lead us through this thing. And don't be afraid to reach out to the pastors and the people who are available through the church. Perhaps you have a life group member or you know a life group member, they're all there to help. And it's amazing to me how God has a way of bringing faithful people into your orbit at precisely the time you need them most.
Yeah.
That has certainly been our experience, and we sincerely hope it is or will become your experience as well. So thank you for listening. I'm going to throw it back to Pastor George. And again, thank you.
Thank you, Terry and Marianne. You've been a huge blessing to the group that's watching this now. And thank you for your willingness to be able to answer these questions specifically. And so you see on the screen right now that there's an email. If you've got a question that wasn't answered here, you can send it to arcfinances2020@gmail.com. And just there was one last one, Terry, that just came in. As I understand it, no one can be evicted. No one can have their utilities shut off during this time. Is that true? And how long do you think that will stay in place?
It is true. Okay, there is an executive order. So when this first pandemic broke out, Governor Walz went in and he declared a pandemic health emergency. That executive order does not have a definitive ending date. So it's continually being looked at. And right now it's indefinite, okay? So you have this order that says, well, we've got a pandemic emergency, and I'm going to issue some executive orders during this emergency for we don't know how long, but for a period of time. So you're right. One of the executive orders in conjunction with this is the governor said there will be no mortgage foreclosures and there will be no evictions due to rent until this order, this indefinite order, expires. Okay.
You said something very specific there. No evictions due to rent.
For non-payment of rent.
Right.
If you're misconduct or somebody's doing drugs or something like that, you can be evicted for misconduct. You cannot be evicted for non-payment of rent. However, I want to caution everybody that does not. It doesn't mean you don't owe rent for each month you don't pay it. It
Right.
doesn't mean you don't owe mortgage payments for each month you don't pay it. It just means during this period of time, they can't evict you for non-payment of rent, and they cannot foreclose on you because of non-payment of mortgage payments. So if you find yourself in that situation, maybe you're behind on your rent or you can't pay the rent, there's a lot of landlords out there right now who are saying, I don't have cash flow during this pandemic and health emergency because maybe none of my tenants are paying rent. So it might be a good time to call your landlord and say, look, I can't pay $800 a month, but I can pay $400 a month, and then get back on track when this emergency ends. And I know of some landlords who are saying, I'd rather have the 400 than the 800. I don't want to have a ton of evictions when this thing ends because that's costly to a landlord. So it might be a perfect time to do that negotiation with your landlord, and it may be a good time to do some kind of negotiation with your lender.
Yeah, good to open up the lines of communication between the parties in that. So excellent
Right.
advice. Good. Again, Jennings, thank you so much for your time and for being able to spend that with us. We are planning on doing more of these, perhaps with the Jennies and perhaps other specialists in different areas of finance. We intend to do that very soon. So stay tuned on to our social media, Facebook, and our Connect email that we send out each week, and we'll be able to let you all know about that. I wonder if I could pray for us right now during this time. Just take a minute.
Absolutely.
Heavenly Father, thank you so much for Terry and Marianne, for our guests that were on today, and for those that are viewing. I pray that you would bless them richly in this time, and knowing that sometimes when we have not, that's when we connect the best. And we pray that you would help us to connect with our friends, our neighbors, those in our church and those in our community. Help us connect better with you, Lord, as well, so that we would take this time, that we would be able to know that you are our Savior, our Redeemer. And we lift up these prayers in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right. Thank you so much, and have a great day. Thanks.
Bye,
Thanks
everybody.
for the opportunity,
Thank
George.
you.